Welcome to a play-by-play review. I'm your host Henry, and once again, going back to the Cthulhu sector for, unfortunately, StarCraft II Heart of the Swarm. Now, I don't mean to be super negative just to start out, but I'm just going to say it up front. I think I've already said it before on either one or two of the past episodes. I'm not a fan of this campaign. I think it is the weakest campaign of all of them by a pretty good margin at that. Not only, well, for a couple reasons. For one, the story is not good. The main story following Sarah Kerrigan is just not a very well told story. I'll go into specifics as we go along, but the gist of it is that it's just one that it's a worse version of the story in Brood War that we got with Kerrigan. So it's a worse version of the Queen of Blades campaign in Brood War that also doesn't understand what made the Brood War campaign worked, in that it was a villain story in the Brood War campaign. You were basically playing a power trip with as a villain, and it works in that sense because you're going around doing a lot of evil stuff. But in the end, you know that Kerrigan is not a good person, and that it's a power trip. And that's not, uncommon for video games, but it's, for Heart of the Swarm, it is very similar, where this is basically just a Kerrigan power trip, but she is now treated entirely as a good guy, or girl, I guess, when she's not doing good things at all. It's not good, in my opinion. And once again, this is all my opinion. This is not, an objective truth of things. I am not the arbiter of what is right and what is wrong in the world. I'm just a guy with a microphone talking about StarCraft. But I don't like this story. The campaign's also really short. It's significantly shorter than Wings of Liberty, even shorter than Legacy of the Void. Obviously longer than all the ones in base StarCraft, but for a game that comes out in 2013, I think is when this comes out, it's disappointingly short. And the way the gameplay is set up, Kerrigan is very much involved. She's sort of your consistent heroic character that you have that you kind of level up along the way. And I'll go into a little bit more specifics as we get into into the nitty gritty. But while Kerrigan is certainly fun to use as a unit, the power that she gets over the course of the story kind of breaks the game and makes kind of playing with the rest of your army not nearly as fun, because it's basically just you're basically just playing with Kerrigan, and everyone else is just kind of there along for the ride. Outside of a mission or two here and there, it's basically just use Kerrigan and then maybe make a composition that could help out here and there. But otherwise, you just don't really need to think about it too much. So that's why it's the most boring campaign, I think, is between all of them, because it's just the Kerrigan show. And you can certainly do the challenge of not using Kerrigan, but with a lot of the later levels being really tough to do without Kerrigan, because they're kind of designed around, you're supposed to have a very, very powerful Queen of Blades at this point. It's, if you just don't use her, then the difficulty spikes significantly. But anyway, I'll stop being negative. It's just the length of the campaign, and just everything about Kerrigan sucks. That does not say everything about this, about Heart of the Swarm is bad. There are a lot of good things in Heart of the Swarm. I will definitely say that. Especially the characters that aren't Kerrigan. And some of the cinematics. But there's still, the bad outweighs the good in this, in my opinion. But we'll start, I'll kind of give a recap of where we are. So, to pick up where we left off at the end of Wings of Liberty. So, Jim Raynor and his the Raynor's Raiders, they teamed up with Valerian Manx, the son of Arcturus Manx, and General Horace Warfield of the Dominion to go assault the Dominion the Zerg home base of Char, which is this big fiery planet that the Zerg have occupied for years. And using a Xel'Naga artifact that was gathered over the course of Wings of Liberty, the artifact was able to purge Kerrigan of most of her Zerginess. Like, she still has Zerg hair, and still has like a lingering connection to the Zerg psionically, but she's no longer under the influence of the Zerg hive mind, or like the lingering overmindness, I think is kind of how they explain it. Because basically how it gets explained, and this is skipping ahead like slightly, but not really, is that Kerrigan, as the previous Queen of Blades, back, basically Kerrigan in her time after the Overmind was killed at the end of StarCraft I, and up to the point where she was cleansed of the infestation, where she was the Queen of Blades. So basically everything during Brood War and during Wings of Liberty, she was still not fully herself, and that she was still like, her mind and goals were influenced by the Overmind. Even if the Overmind was dead, it was still like the lingering essence and influence of it, or of him, I guess, because the Overmind's kind of a guy. But it's his sort of lingering essence, legacy, whatever you want to call it, was still inside of Kerrigan, and that's what made her be evil, essentially, and like heartless, and do all the stuff she did in Brood War and StarCraft and in Wings of Liberty. So it's kind of a cop out to to explain away Kerrigan being evil, and why she is, you should not feel bad for playing as her now, and like why she is a good guy now. She's kind of an anti-hero in this game. It's just not great, once again. But anyway, that's to circle back around. That is the summary. So Kerrigan has been rescued by Jim, and Jim and Valerian have taken Kerrigan to a remote research lab run by the Umojan Protectorate, which is this like other random human faction that just kind of exists and is kind of separate. Not super important lore-wise there. But yeah, basically Kerrigan is off in this little laboratory. And the opening cinematic, though, is where things start off on a high note, a really, really high note here. Because this was the trailer, essentially, for Heart of the Swarm. And Blizzard's always had been, I should say. During their heyday, they were the company that made the best game cinematics by a large margin. They had been doing it for years. And while the Wings of Liberty trailer, which is the one where Tychus is basically getting suited up in his suit of armor with Manx talking over, that is very iconic, and it's very good, don't get me wrong, but it was not a lot of action. Like, there were a couple action shots towards the end of it, but overall it was just kind of Blizzard flexing their new animation capabilities. I actually have the art book for StarCraft II. I forget if it's just Wings of Liberty or all three. I think it's all three expansions. Very, very cool book. I got it at a convention a couple of years back, and it's like, there's a good section on it that goes into detail about that Tychus cinematic. But anyway, the Heart of the Swarm cinematic for the trailer for this is so good. It blows everything else out of the water. And let me be clear, I'm not a fan of the Zerg. I think they're a very boring faction overall. I don't like Kerrigan, and they're my least favorite of the three factions. This is the best cinematic in all of StarCraft. The entire franchise. By a good margin. It is insane. It's basically a premonition of sorts. It's a dream. It winds up being revealed that it is a dream of Kerrigan while she's in the lab. But it's basically, the dream depicts her as the Queen of Blades launching an assault on Core Hall with the Zerg Swarm to eventually, get her revenge on Mansk. And, it starts off in like the cockpit of a Viking, and it's flying up through some rain clouds, and you see a Zerg Leviathan, which is this, you see it in Wings of Liberty, And because the scale of the actual units in game is not representative to how they are in lore, the Leviathan is absolutely massive. It is so, it's like the size of a moon. It's insane. Maybe not like quite size of a moon, but it's really, it's like the biggest single thing in StarCraft. And it's basically a giant transport, essentially. It's this giant creature that transports the Zerg across space. And then it like cuts to a bunch of drop pods, which shoot out of Leviathan as they get bombarded by Vikings. And then they land on the city. And then it's like, you get the Terran defenders, and then they get overwhelmed. And then there's like this really cool shot of a siege tank speeding away through the city, and it's getting chased down by an Ultralisk, and you see like Ultralisks are really, really big, and the Ultralisk just kind of swats the siege tank away, and then a Viking shows up and transforms, like it's because the Viking can only shoot ground if it's on the ground, so like transforms like basically right in front of the Ultralisk to try and shoot at it, and the Ultralisk swats it away as well. It's so cool. And then it's like you get the wide action shot of the like massive Terran defensive line with like Marines and siege tanks galore in like the town square, just like going to town on this massive advancing Zerg force of just Zerglings and Ultralisks. And then a Nidus Worm pops up in the back line, and it's so good. And then it's like the statue falls, the statue of Manx falls, and then you see the background of Battleship getting literally brought down, crashing into the planet from orbit. And battlecruisers are also massive as well. So it's like, this is a big deal. And then it's like, then it flashes, it's Kerrigan's like giving her monologue. It's like, we are the swarm, or I am the swarm, or whatever. It's like, I am the swarm, armies will shatter, worlds will burn, something along the line. I am the queen of blades. Manx will suffer, doing her usual revenge quotes here and there. And then it's like, you get the shot of her Queen of Blades form all purple, which is a bit of foreshadowing of what she will eventually get to. We'll get to that later. And yeah, then she wakes up from her dream in her lab, and it was all a dream. But so that cinematic is so good. It's so good, and it's just all downhill from there. Anyway, after that, you get another cinematic with Jim and Kerrigan talking, and Jim's basically like, okay, forget about forget about Manx, forget about the war and all that. Let's just leave together so we can go be happy and be in love and peace and whatnot. And it's like kind of stupid because like Jim for the past 4 years has been fighting against Manx, and also had vowed at the end of Brood War to be the one to kill Kerrigan, for the whole killing Phoenix and betraying them thing. But he just kind of, I guess, forgave her now because she said sorry or something, and like explained it away. It's not a good characterization moment for Jim, because it's like he's very much a leader. Jim Raynor is a leader, and he is definitely a guy who tends to stick things out to the end, and isn't willing to just dip at the first sign of trouble or anything like that. But with Kerrigan, I guess he for sure is. But anyway, enough negativity. Let's get into the actual missions. So the first mission is Lab Rat, and it starts with you. You kind of play as Kerrigan in this. Not for the whole campaign, you're more just playing as generic commander, commanding everyone. But in this one, you're sort of more playing as Kerrigan, because you're in the lab, so you're like in a bunch of sub labs and stuff. And there's like a little observation window with Valerian, and he's all tiny with his character model. It's pretty funny. And so it's basically this whole mission is like, here's how to build a hatchery. Here's how to make a spawning pool. Here's how to hatch an overlord. It's just like how to play as Zerg 101 with some, it's a little banter here and there between Valerian and Kerrigan. So you get some drones, you make a hatchery, you make a spawning pool, you make some overlords, then you make some Zerglings. And that's about it. And then Kerrigan's like, you shouldn't mess around with the Zerg, Valerian. Here, let me show you why. So she just starts building a bunch of Zerglings, and then breaks out of their containment cell and starts destroying all the robots that were set to defend. And Valerian gets all, panic and stuff. And he's like, Kerrigan, what are you doing? Stop doing that. And so you just go down. It's a really, really easy mission where you just make a bunch of Zerglings and then just attack move through the entire facility. Though there's one very funny line where if you don't make Zerglings and you just make drones and attack with drones, the normal line is like, I forget exactly, but it's like, Kerrigan, stop attacking with your Zergling or something like that. But with the drones, like, Kerrigan, stop attacking with drones? You're attacking with drones? What? And Kerrigan's like, you can never, there's like, Zerg are always unpredictable, Valerian. You can never expect stuff. It's a really funny line that I completely butchered because I don't remember it off the top of my head, but it's a fun little Easter egg that the developers knew, like, we're aware that, like, not everyone is just going to go mass Zergling. Like, some people are crazy enough to go mass drone, and it's certainly possible. Drones do have an attack. It's just not a very good one. The whole mission is basically just go to Zergling, or use Zerglings, destroy some robots, find some more Zerglings, and then destroy a bigger robot at the end. And then, yeah, that's about it. Then the next cutscene basically shows that the lab is under attack by the Dominion. There's actually a really nice shot of a Dominion battlecruiser, like, up in atmosphere as it gets, like, lit up by like, because it's like pitch black outside, and you can only kind of see the shadow from, like, the moonlight. And then there's, like, AA fire starts going off, and then you can kind of see the silhouette a bit more. It's really cool. Blizzard is really good at framing their battlecruisers in cutscenes. They're very good at that. But yeah, with the Dominion attacking the laboratory, the gang has to get out. Valerian is able to get out easily. So you basically get to control Kerrigan in this one, and she's more back to her ghost form. So she's got her ghost suit, though she can't cloak in this, but she's got her sniper rifle. And then Jim shows up as sort of like an AI like unit that just kind of tags along. And so it's a no build mission where you just kind of have to go through and like with any no build mission, it's kind of a puzzle-ish where you have to manage your health and energy and abilities correctly as you go along and find some extra units here and there. There's like one section where there's a bunch of Dominion forces in a room. And it's like you can choose, you can either gas the room, which will get rid of all the biological units, or release a bunch of Zerg, which will probably get rid of all of the units in there, but then leave a bunch of Zerg to deal with. So it's, a little bit of choice. Just got to give a little bit of player choice here and there. So you get out of the lab, and then you go to a tram, and then it flies you off over to like the hangar area, or basically the place where all the where Rainer's dropship is. And so you go there, and then Kerrigan starts crossing a bridge to get to the dropship, and then the bridge explodes, which strands Rainer on the other side. So Rainer has to go find a different way out. And then as Kerrigan, you have a little final boss fight against a unit called the Archangel, which is this basically just a Viking, but like upscaled and with a different skin to it, or model, I guess. Like skin in the sense of like video game cosmetic skin. But yeah, it's different model Viking. I think it's uses the Hell's Angels mercenary Viking from Wings of Liberty, but it's like 3 times as big. And it's a boss fight where it's like a bullet hell-ish kind of. It's got some attack lines, like very telegraphed. Like there's little indicators to show like this line, he's going to shoot a bunch of missiles on this line. And there's like this cluster of circles is where you're going to shoot some missiles and stuff. It's a really easy boss fight because it just telegraphs its attacks very obviously, and they're not very fast. And there's also like a health recharge station that you can use periodically. So it's like, it's very easy. It's the second mission in the game, so it's not like you need to be hard, but it is what it is. Also, as Rainer is leaving, like basically after you beat the mission, there's like a in-game cutscene that shows Rainer. Actually, I forget if this was during it or after. But basically, Nova Terra, the Terran ghost who you could side with back in the first in Wings of Liberty, she's leading the force to capture Rainer and Kerrigan. And so there's like a point, it might actually be more towards the start, and like Nova will actually comment on the Tosh thing, where it's like, you should have helped me with that whole Tosh situation and whatnot. So it's like pretty cool callback at least there. But yeah, in the end, doesn't really matter. And so basically after that, Kerrigan takes the dropship Rainer's dropship up to the Hyperion to meet up with Matt Horner and Valerian. And they're like, Jim's not here yet. And Kerrigan's like, we need to go back. And Horner and Valerian are like, we need to leave because the Dominion's here. And Kerrigan does not want to do this. She wants to go back and find Jim. So she goes back down the surface while the Hyperion remains up in orbit to stay as long as they can while Kerrigan tries to find her boyfriend. So after that, we go to the third mission. I actually don't know if I mentioned the name of the second mission. The second mission was Back in the Saddle. Third mission, we get to Rendezvous. And this is one where there's this big old gun that the Dominion set up, which it can shoot down a bunch of stuff, like air stuff, so we got to destroy it. And it's basically first mission you get to properly build with Zerg. Kerrigan is contacted by a broodmother, which is basically a type of Zerg that she created to during the 4 years she was kind of chilling. Basically created them to replace the Cerebrits, where they're not exactly extensions of her will, but they're more like if she's the queen, they're they're basically like nobles. The best way I can describe it, if to use that analogy. But they're Kerrigan has total control of the swarm. The queen, or the broodmothers, I should say, have control over the broods, which are very large subsets of the Zerg, which are what the Cerebrits did back in StarCraft 1. The broods in StarCraft 1 were controlled directly by the Cerebrits, so Dagoth and Zaz, I think, were the only two Cerebrits ever named. And in this case, Kerrigan has replaced them with broodmothers. And in this case, it is the broodmother Noctul, who's just been chilling on the planet, I guess. And she's like, I've sensed your return, my queen. And Kerrigan's like, I'm not your queen, but okay, I'll take the help. And Noctul's like, if you can stall out for a little bit of time, I will send you reinforcements. So you do that. You get Zerglings, you get Swarm Queens, which are they're a unit for multiplayer, essentially. I also forgot to mention the new units that each faction gets in multiplayer. I'll get to that after the next mission. But yeah, so it's Queens are a support unit. They have a okay attack that can go against air and ground. So a bit all arounder there. They're it's a worse Hydralisk attack essentially, but they also have a heal ability that is automatic, which is nice. And then they also have the ability to place down creep tumors, which spreads creep, which it grants vision for the Zerg and also gives them increased movement speed. Queens also are really, really slow off of creep. So it's they're not really a dedicated offensive unit. They're more of a support unit. So it's, you just go mass Zergling with some Queens along the way, and then you free up some more Zerg along the way. And then you wait around, and then Noctul's reinforcements show up, which is just basically just a giant number of Nidus Worms with a bunch of Zerglings and some Queens. So you just get a mass army, and then you go and overwhelm the enemy forces. And you blow up the cannon, and it's all good. And Kerrigan is unable to find Jim, though. And so she goes back to the dropship, and she's also not super happy that she has to control the Zerg again. Because Kerrigan's Jim and everyone did this whole thing to get me not having be Zerg anymore, not having be the Queen of Blades, but here I am again. Oh, what am I going to do? And then her dropship's TV turns on, and there's a UNN broadcast, and Kate Lockwell's reporting, and basically is so the Dominion raided a place, and captured a known terrorist, James Rayner, and they took him in for a brief interrogation before summarily executing him. And it shows a picture of his Marine suit with the visor closed, and there's a bullet hole in the visor. So it's oh no, Jim's dead. He's not dead. I'm just gonna say right now, he's not dead. It shouldn't be too much of a surprise that they wouldn't kill him off like that. But yeah, no, he's still alive. Kerrigan obviously does not know this. She thinks he's dead because why wouldn't she? And she goes kind of crazy, or not crazy, but more just she gets really angry, and basically is all right, yep, I'm gonna kill Manx now. Don't care anymore. And so she goes back to the Hyperion for a sec and gets angry there, and then leaves, and finds a Leviathan. Basically takes her dropship, goes into hyperspace, goes to a different planet, finds a Leviathan, and makes that her new home base. Then you get introduced to the first of the side characters, and So the side characters in Heart of the Swarm overall are excellent. Isha, who is sort of the adjutant, is not. She's just really, really boring. She's basically just there to like an exposition dump when needed, and that's about it. She has very little personality. Her delivery is very flat. She's very robotic for a living being. I'll just say that. Unfortunately, the first side character we meet is not interesting, but after that, gets significantly better. So after that, as with kind of all of the typical StarCraft campaign, it's after the first 3 missions, which are sort of the tutorial missions, the game opens up. And I will actually get over to the multiplayer units here real quick just to run down. So in both Heart of the Swarm and Legacy of the Void, each faction got a couple of new units to play with in multiplayer. I just feel like going over them just for fun. So the Zerg get the Swarm Host and the Viper, which I will go into at later points since they are both units that can be locked during the campaign. The Protoss get the Oracle, which is this flying caster, essentially is what they usually describe it as. It's a support unit and a harassment unit that has various different abilities and a decent ground attack that has gone through, I think, a couple changes over the course of time in multiplayer. I don't play too much multiplayer, so I don't know. I can't name all the abilities off the top of my head, but it's a pretty cool unit. The second is the Tempest for the Protoss, which is this big, bulky capital ship that has a slow charging, but good damage, extremely long-ranged attack. Essentially, it basically just charges up this giant ball of energy that can hit anything from across the map. It's crazy. I love the Tempest. It's really cool. And the last unit they got was the Mothership Core, which was so good it actually had to be removed from the game by Legacy of the Void. Or at least, I don't know if it got fully removed or if it's back or not, but it was stupidly broken. Okay, so it was, now that I'm double checking, it was removed. It was, it was a little too good. It had too many abilities. It was a flying unit that you could get pretty early on that had just good utility all around. So it was just every game you'd see it just get rushed instantly because it was really, really good. And then for the Terrans, they kind of got the weakest part, I feel like the worst part about it, or worst set of units. Although even then they're not too bad. So they get the Hellbat, which is actually you can transform the Hellion into the Hellbat, which the Hellion is a very fast harassment unit that is also pretty fragile. The Hellbat is more a slower. It trades speed and range for more bulk and area of effect. So basically the flamethrower on the Hellion shoots a line with shoots a line of fire with a decent amount of range. The Hellbat, its flamethrower instead kind of sprays in a cone in front of it with a shorter range. The Hellbat also has, it's basically a mech essentially. It turns from a car into a mech, which is really cool. I have to say that the Hellbat and Hellion combo is a really, really cool design. And the Hellion or the Hellbat has basically shields on its arms, so it has it'll kind of prop its shields up in front of its face and hunker down when it shoots out its flamethrower. It's pretty cool. And it gets extra armor because of it. It's just significantly slower. And I think I don't know exactly how the damage compares between the two, but it's pretty neat. Anyway, then the other unit is the Widowmine, which is actually pretty interesting. And it's basically a fragile, robotic spider, essentially, that can burrow into the ground and shoot out a missile on a very slow cooldown, but the missile does a ton of damage. So it is sort of an ambush unit that can harass workers if you kind of just send it out into the worker line, and you can burrow it down there, and it'll launch a missile and just wipe out the entire worker line. It's a very interesting unit. I will certainly say that. But anyway, let's get back to the campaign, I guess. Just wanted to highlight them because they are new. So as with all the campaigns of StarCraft II, it is open to player choice on how you want to complete it. Wings of Liberty is the best they did of it because the mission design was very wide open for both Heart of the Swarm and Legacy of the Void, but Heart of the Swarm especially. It is there's only there's only 6 total. Well, if you don't count the opening 3 missions and the closing 3 missions, there are only 5 areas to go to, like 5 mission chains. And while that sounds the same as Wings of Liberty, the first 3 essentially are like kind of grouped together, and you have to beat those 3 and then go to the next 2, and then you beat those next 2, and then you can go to the last, the invasion of Core Hall. I'm just going to spoil it, but it shouldn't be that too much of a surprise, as that's where the finale heads to. It's a bit more limited, and you spend like 2 to 3 missions on each planet. And while I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, it makes the game a bit more linear. And problem is there's also just not nearly enough. Like there should be an extra like planet or 2 like in the first and second half of the game, because it goes by way too quick. So I'll start with sort of the first planet that I think most people go to, and the first one that makes sense logically. So actually, I'll give you the 2 options of where to go. So the 2 options you get are a planet called Kaldir, which is this like icy planet where a brood is known to exist, but it has seemingly gone missing essentially. And so you can go there and investigate, or you can go back to Char and just take back Char, which I do not like that design decision at all, or like narrative decision, because this is Kerrigan. Kerrigan has basically been like back as the Queen of Blades for like a solid day at best. And you could just go to Char and beat the giant Dominion fortress as your first set of missions. It's tough. Like Char's not an easy stretch, but you can still do it. And I find that just not cool. I don't think that's a good move, because it's like the Dominion and basically just Terran assault on Char were the final 3 missions of Wings of Liberty. And those were, the culmination of the Terran campaign. Like that is the best the Terran has at that point, going up against the best the Zerg has. And, like both sides are heavily beaten down, but in the end, the Terran wins. And it's, it's a hard fought victory. And like, I don't know, a couple months later, you can just tear that all down with like basically Zerglings and very few else. It's really, really dumb in my opinion. So that's why I never go to Char first, because it just doesn't make sense. Like Char should be way down the line, in my opinion. Like that should be a late in the story type of place to take back. So instead, we're going to go to Kaldir. But before we go to Kaldir, there's one other character that I've neglected to introduce. That is someone where it's basically once you get to the Leviathan and you meet Isha and whatnot. So there's like with the Hyperion, there's different rooms you can go to do your different stuff. So like the main, I don't remember what it's called, like what the room is called, but it's basically like where Isha's at and where you can choose to start the mission. Essentially, that's the room. It's also got like a little observation window to show like what spot you're at and whatnot, but it's just kind of there. The other rooms, there's only 2 off the top of my head. There's one of them's not even really a room. It's just a menu for Kerrigan's powers, so you can just mix and match what kind of abilities you have for Kerrigan. And Kerrigan basically levels up over the course of the campaign, and as she levels up, she gains access to more and more abilities. There's different tiers, and each tier has 2 to 3. Well, it starts out with 2, eventually gets to 3 after a certain point, which I'll get to in a little bit. And each tier has a different set. So like first tier is basically just your kinetic blast tier, because kinetic blast is really good. Especially just click on a thing in range and deal 300 damage to it. It's ridiculous. Kinetic blast is really nice, but yeah, it's like as you go up, you get to various other abilities. So it's similar to the lab in a sense from Wings of Liberty. But the other room, however, is the Evolution Pit. And the Evolution Pit is actually, it's a building also that you can construct in normal gameplay to, basically it's there to open up static defense options to build. It's like static defense. So your spine and spore crawlers are locked behind the evolution pit, but also evolution pits gets you your armor, attack, and like armor and attacker upgrades. So it's the same as the engineering bay and the forge for Terran and Protoss, respectively. But this specific evolution pit, the one inside the Leviathan, it's basically the armory. So it's where you can customize your units, but it's also home to Abathur, the Evolution Master. And Abathur is one of the best characters in StarCraft II, and just all of StarCraft in general. He is so much fun. So Abathur was basically created by the Overmind in order to, with the sole purpose of making the swarm more efficient. He's all about efficiency. So like he's like even more so than Isha, who is just very bland and monotone. Abathur speaks in kind of a robotic sense of like he only uses words that are necessary. Like he doesn't say anything else. He is just like swarm, good, efficiency, must, like no filler words essentially. He is straight and to the point. His personality is great because he's very much like a proud master of his craft, even if he's like trying outwardly to just be entirely rational and like detached, but like he's got an ego to him, and it's really funny because he's very much not afraid to boast when he wants to, even though like he won't certainly claim that he's boasting, but like he's got an ego to him, and he's great. Abathur is so much fun, and it's always a joy to go to the evolution pit and just talk with Abathur because he's always got something fun to say. But anyway, so the evolution pit, you have like each of your basic units, and there's like 3 different mutations you can choose, and those are like your basic upgrades. So it's like Zerglings, I think you can choose to have like increased attack, increased speed, or like increased armor. I think is like between the 3 of them. You can only have one chosen at a time, but you can choose whichever one to go with freely. I think it's like the attack speed, I think is what it is. That's usually what I go with because it's really good. But honestly, like all 3 of them are pretty solid. But anyway, to actually go to the first mission on the planet of Kaldir, which is known as Harvest of Screams. It is, so you go to the planet and it is very cold. It is very, very cold. And Isha's like, so there's this thing called a flash freeze where basically the weather gets really, really cold, really, 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 really quickly for a bit, and everything freezes over. So you're going to have to deal with that. And Abathur is like, I'm definitely being more verbose than Abathur is, but he basically like, there's this creature called an Ursidon matriarch, and it and its kin have adapted to the snow. So if you go kill it and take its essence, you can evolve the swarm, and I can implement it into the swarm, and we can be immune to the flash freeze. And also, I forget exactly around this time, but I forget exactly, but around this time, I think it's Isha points out that they've detected a Protoss research group, essentially. It's like I think they claim it's like a research group, but it is like a full-on army out here. But it's like they're doing whatever. So Kerrigan's like, oh great, the Protoss, we got to go fight them. And so yeah, basically after the initial segment where you find some roaches, which are a new unit to StarCraft II, not Heart of the Swarm, but they were introduced in Wings of Liberty. Roaches are pretty cool, where there's this kind of bulky ground unit that has a ground to ground ground to ground anti-armor like acid spit essentially. So they're just a solid unit that you can throw into any sort of composition because they can soak up a good bit of damage, deal a good bit of damage in return. But in later missions, they aren't going to be winning you the mission, all things considered, because they do need more. They do need better damaging units to really supplement them. But overall, they're still solid. But yeah, so this is the one where you unlock the roach, and then after you kill the matriarchs, or I think there's one matriarch, you get the essence and you adapt to the cold, and you go and you're trying to find Broodmother Navash, who's the broodmother of this local Zerg brood. You find her hive cluster, which has been kind of frozen over, and also no Navash or really anyone. Kerrigan's like, this is not good. And then you got to fight the Protoss, because the Protoss are like, it's Queen of Blades. We don't like her at all, because I guess they just weren't really caught up in the whole thing that Kerrigan was removed from the whole old Queen of Blades things, or Queen of Blades thing, but also Kerrigan is completely and totally willing to just kill all the Protoss. And for reference, these are just the Daylon Protoss. These are not Tal'Darim. These are not evil Protoss. These are just normal good Protoss. It's also one reason why I don't like this chain of missions, because like these are just Protoss that are like not enemies of the Swarm. I mean, like they are in the sense that the Protoss are not friendly to the Swarm, but like at this point in the story, they shouldn't really be enemies, because Kerrigan only really has her sights set on Mengsk, and like she has no beef with the Protoss at this point. So I like why she's fighting, like why she's so soon after being freed just throwing hands with the Daylon frustrates me. But anyway, so the mission progresses. You have to basically destroy these 3 like I think they're called Silent Spires. That's basically like if they take too long, the Zerg can use, or not the Zerg, the Protoss can use them to contact Shakuras, and Shakuras will send the Golden Armada, which is basically a giant Protoss fleet. And if the Golden Armada shows up, Kerrigan and the Zerg are dead because they just don't have the forces to fight back. So it's sort of a race against time, but it is a very short, it's a very extended time period. I actually don't even know if there's a time limit on this one, but it's like you gotta. Like Isha's yelling at me. He's like, you gotta destroy the spires before the connection gets established, and there's like no time limit or something. It's whatever. But eventually you do, and the Protoss retreat. But they're like, this isn't over, Kerrigan. We're gonna warn the Golden Armada, and they're gonna get you. Blah blah blah. And I forget if it was after this mission or the next mission. I think it's after the next mission. So yeah, but there's another character that gets introduced. Is it actually? Let me double check here. I think it might actually be after this mission. I'll just say it's after this mission. So during this, the Zerg capture a Protoss scientist named Lasara, and she's basically your hostage for a little bit. So she just kind of chills in your Leviathan next to Isha for a little bit. And so after this, the next mission is shoot the messenger. So, that's bodes well for the Protoss. Basically, there's a couple of warp gates, and the Protoss are setting shuttles to try and get through the warp gate. And it's like if one shuttle gets through, they'll warn Chakura. So it's same like weight of failure. It's like basically prevent the Protoss from calling their friends, essentially. But this is the mission where the map's a bit wider. It just map's a bit more open. You also get Hydralisks. Hydralisks return from StarCraft 1. They're a bit less bulky than they were in StarCraft 1. They're a bit more of a, like, they're definitely squishier, but still a good all-around unit. Hydralisks are very fun. They have a pretty rapid attack that hits both air and ground. And just, they're a good, solid unit. I like Hydralisks a lot. And it's basically, this is one where you just build up a ton of Hydralisks, because they're also pretty mobile. Build up some spore crawlers where you need to, and you just camp the you camp the things, the warp gates or whatever they're called, and destroy the shuttles. You can actually beat this mission before all the shuttles show up if you go and destroy all the Protoss launch bays on the other side of the map. There's just a lot of enemy Protoss preventing you. It's possible, and it's a fun challenge, but it's you don't have to, essentially. It's one of those optional victory conditions. I also forgot to mention in the last mission, you find Nefash's corpse. She was dead from the Protoss. So it is what it is. Kerrigan gets all sad and angry, but I don't care. But anyway, shoot the messenger happens, and you shoot down the messengers. It's it's really not that interesting of a story mission. Like, it's a fun gameplay wise. I enjoy the mission playing through it, but like summarizing it, it's entirely in the title. You shoot the messenger. That's about it. Luckily, the next mission, Enemy Within, is much more interesting to talk about. This is probably the best mission in the game in Heart of the Swarm, because it is it is what the Zerg are all about. So you get informed that the Protoss are taking their giant ship that they came here on. their like big vessel that they have, whatever they call it. And they're basically just leaving the planet and going back to Shakuras. And so Kerrigan, not wanting to have this whole thing get, ratted out and whatnot, and just not wanting to draw the ire of the Protoss at the moment, wants to figure out a way to destroy the ship and prevent it from returning to Shakuras. She does this by going up to Lasara, taking this little green orb thing with a larva in it, and basically just psionically implanting it into Lasara is the best way I can describe it. And then she releases Lasara, basically releases a psychic hold or psionic hold, that basically that there's a way that like Lasara was blocked from the Kala and her Protoss friends, so like she couldn't talk to them or whatnot. But so Kerrigan releases that hold, and the Protoss not knowing what was going on and thinking fast, they basically warp Lasara back onto their vessel before Lasara can warn them that she has been infested. So she gets teleported on and like immediately gets chest bursted, essentially. Like she lasts like a whole second. She's like, I have to warn everyone, and then just dies. Just like that. So out pops the larva, and Kerrigan's like, you need to go and like grow and destroy this place. And she gives you like some instructions as a larva. So you just kind of hop around a little bit, and you can like parasitically infest biological creatures. So like the ship is full of various different fauna taken from the planet because it's a research vessel, and which is it was something explained earlier, which is pretty cool. So it's like you kind of set this whole thing up a little bit, and so eventually you go around, and you can even take control of an Ursidon, so you can use that to like kill a couple Protoss, which is kind of neat. And then you have to get rid of the Ursidon and consume its biomass, and then go and like hide in a little alcove and evolve. And the larva evolves into a broodmother named Niadra. And Niadra is actually pretty cool. And Kerrigan basically gives Niadra the directive of killing all the Protoss on the ship and destroying the ship, also preventing it from returning to Shakuras. And that's what you do. So Niadra can create Zerglings, an infinite number of Zerglings, though only a certain amount can be used at a time, but there's no limit on how many she can produce as a whole. And it's basically you go through the Protoss ship using Niadra and initially her Zerglings to first destroy the engines. I think it's just like the warp core or whatever it's called. So you blow that up, and then basically you go along. It's a no build mission. Find more biomass, get it. Niadra evolves again, gets bigger, gets some more health, and that's it. And then is able to spawn some roaches. Keep going through, killing any Protoss in the way, and then eventually gets more biomass, evolves again. Then she can get some roaches. You can also find another Ursidon to help you out, and eventually you get to the bridge and stop all these escape pods from escaping and kill the bridge crew. And after that, the whole ship goes down. Essentially, there's no more Protoss, and Niadra has taken it over. And it's like, summarizing it, it's like a pretty simple mission, but playing through it, it's pretty cool because it's like very much a sort of microcosm of how the Zerg operate. Because you like even just one infected Protoss can lead to the destruction of their entire ship through a snowballing swarm. Now, of course, the infection in this case was or infestation, I say, because that's what the term they use for it. The infestation in this case was a bit special because it's not like a normal Zerg; it's a whole broodmother, but it's still pretty cool. It's probably the most like Zergy mission in the whole campaign, which is pretty cool. But eventually, Niadra's chilling on the ship, and she's like, "My queen, I have completed the task for you," and then she just never hears back from Kerrigan. It's a little weird. I don't know why. I guess because like too far in space or something. But I don't know why Kerrigan just like never talks with Niadra again, and we never see Niadra again. Apparently, she shows up in a book or two, and I think dies in one of them. I don't know, but it's still pretty cool. And it's for a series of missions that I don't exactly enjoy. Story-wise, because again, why are you fighting the Daylom at this point? It's the enemy within is a good capstone to that series of missions. And so before we move on to the next main planet, there's one other section of missions that I have to go over. I got like a hair stuck in my mouth. from like my mustache. That was annoying. But anyway, the evolution missions. So one other aspect of the evolution pit in Abathur is that you can create a permanent upgrade to your combat units. And there's basically two choices you can choose between for each one. And to show them off, Abathur basically gives you a little mini mission for each of them. So I'll kind of go briefly through these. So the Zergling mission, which you can get after completing any two missions after mission rendezvous. So after the third tutorial mission, the Zergling evolution is you get to choose between either the Raptor Zergling or the Swarmling Zergling. So the Raptor Zergling has the ability to jump up and down cliffs and basically leap over enemies and allies and leap towards targets from a range. And they also get +2 bonus damage. Raptors are really, really good. Meanwhile, the Swarmlings, basically, instead of spawning 2 Zerglings per unit, they spawn 3, and then they also spawn instantly. However, they don't cost reduced supply, and other than that, they are just normal Zerglings. So I've used both before, and the Swarmlings are kind of fun if you want to just like hold down the Z button and spawn like 70 Zerglings in a second. It's kind of fun that way, but the Raptors are just better. The Raptors are really nice and make the Zerglings significantly more viable than what they normally would be in this campaign. And yeah, the evolution missions themselves are pretty fun. And like they're very much geared towards the strengths of each specific strain. But overall, I'm not really going to go into detail about the evolution missions. I think there's there's a couple, like I think the Hydralisk evolution and the Ultralisk evolution I might highlight a little bit more. But anyway, the Roach evolution mission, because that happens after Enemy Within. You get to choose between the Corpser strain and the Vile strain. The Corpser strain is basically any unit that is attacked by the Roach will spawn a Roachling if killed, which is basically, it actually spawned 2. And the Roachlings are these like pint-sized roaches with timed life that do melee damage instead of range damage. I never really cared for them because it's like, it's basically, you just swarm a bit more, and they can basically act as like a bit of a buffer for the ranged roaches, because the Roachlings are expendable, and they're just there for like chip damage and tanking and like drawing the attention of your enemies. But it's just kind of, I didn't really care for them too much. The Vile strain, however, is a bit more interesting because it's basically it shoots, like, instead of shooting green acid, it shoots this like purple globby kind of liquid that, along with dealing damage, also like slows down enemy movement and attack speed a good bit. So it's like, because I like to use roaches, especially later on, as more support units rather than frontline attackers. I usually use Hydralisks more so, and also just Kerrigan, and then especially Ultralisks later on down the line. So just throwing in a couple Vile Roaches is nice because you can just have that extra, debuff applied while not like really having to worry too much about your roaches too much. But yeah, so that's that. We'll get back to the evolution missions in a moment when they become available. So after you beat one of the 2 starting worlds, either Kaldir or Char, Zeratul will show up on your ship, and basically he'll duel Kerrigan for a sec, and then he does his grabs Kerrigan's face, and he's like, "You need to see the Zerg homeworld, the actual Zerg homeworld, where the Zerg came from all those years ago." And he basically explains how in a planet called Xeris, very far away from the actual Kaprulu sector, existed the Zerg even before the Xel'Naga showed up. So one day the Xel'Naga showed up, plucked some Zerg from there, and you use those Zerg to create the Zerg swarm as we know it. However, the Zerg that remained on Xeris became the Primal Zerg. Untouched by the Xel'Naga, they basically entirely a survival of the fittest society, where they kill, they evolve, and those, the strongest will lead packs and whatnot. It's a pretty cool concept, because it's like, it leans more towards the like animalistic side of the Zerg rather than, say, like the hive mind and the monster side, where it's like they're still very much like very terrifying monsters, the Primal Zerg, but it's more so just like an animal kingdom over there. And so Zeratul's like, you should go there because you need some power over there. So go over there. So we're going to go to Xeris instead of going to Char because I don't think going to Char this early is narratively makes sense. So you arrive in Xeris, and it's a sort of like jungle-y type planet, and your goal is to awaken the Ancient One. I think Zeratul is there for a bit, and he tells you to go awaken the Ancient One, which is supposedly the oldest living Zerg. And you see there's like giant mouth in the middle of the map, and your goal is to like go around, find some of these wild creatures called Quilgor, and you have to go and kill them, harvest their meat, and then chuck the meat into the giant mouth. There's a primal pack leader named Brack who is not happy you're here, and also not happy that you're trying to wake the Ancient because he doesn't really want to see the Ancient woken up because it would probably mean, a more powerful Zerg than him, essentially. So you have to, basically it's managing your resources type of mission where you have a lot of stuff going on at once, where you have to be the one, you have to do harvest meat while also defend meat against Brack, because Brack's trying to destroy the meat across a wide map. This is also the mission where you get the Mutalisk, which is not quite as good as it was in StarCraft 1, but it's still pretty solid, and especially on this mission, it's pretty nice. And so eventually, though, you're able to get enough meat to feed the Ancient One, and then Brack shows up himself to try and take down Kerrigan. Instead, you take down Brack. So one pack leader down, and then the Ancient One, Zervin, wakes up, and he's this big old like lizard dragony type of thing. He's pretty cool. It's a cool design, and he spouts off some kind of like mysterious, like various cryptic kind of things, but he's basically is like, I'm willing to give you the power you seek, so long as you help me out as well. Kerrigan agrees to this, and so next mission, Zervin points Kerrigan to the first spawning pool. And so spawning pools are like the basic unit building. They unlock the Zergling, and by extension, like basically you have to get the spawning pool to get everything else. So it's they're pretty important, and the first spawning pool is pretty important. It's very big also. So this is a mission where you get this is a mission known as the Crucible, where you get the unit, the Swarm Host, which is a defensive unit. I actually really like Swarm Host, even if it's not very good, just because it's really, really expensive and just kind of situational. But essentially, it's this sort of four-legged creature with sort of a draconic face and whatnot, and it has this giant sort of mushroomy thing on its back that can spawn locusts from it. And locusts, in this sense, are like giant flying insects that are like pretty tanky, actually, and shoot a little acid spit that does good damage, and they have a time life, so they'll die. But then like basically around the same time they die, a new wave of locusts will spawn up. So they're very good at just spawning infinite waves of locusts to just continuously harass a area. This is entirely a defense one, because Kerrigan goes into the chrysalis and the spawning pool and is basically chilling out in it for like 30 minutes. So she can emerge with new power. And so you have to defend against the remnants of Brack's pack, as well as a new pack led by the Primal Zerg Yagdra. And so you have to defend on both sides from that. And it's a decently tough defense mission, but not the most interesting one in the world. Eventually you go and you hold out for 30 minutes and whatnot. And then Kerrigan emerges, and she emerges as the Queen of Blades. Like, it's the same design, but she's now purple, and you can actually see her eyes. They're not just like glowing orange. It's not a great design, I'm gonna be honest. It was kind of boring. But Kerrigan's gone Super Saiyan now, essentially, is the best way I can describe it. And then you get cut to Core Hall, and Manx is there, and for some reason he just has the Zelnagar artifact, and it's like really dumb that it reveals this, because it's like supposed to be a twist later when like at the end of the game, or like the final cutscene, but they just spoil it here. It's kind of dumb. Anyway, the final mission in the Xeris quest line, line of missions, is Supreme, and it's basically Zervin is like, hey, now that you're all powerful and such, you should go kill the other pack leaders because they're going to challenge you. So that's what you use. And so it's a boss rush, essentially. And for an RTS is actually pretty cool because I feel like most RTSs don't really have dedicated boss fights, especially good ones. But these are actually pretty fun. So the first one you fight is Yagdra, and you don't do it alone. You get some sort like various units to come along with you, and oh yeah, also I almost forgot to mention Dahaka. So yeah, for some reason I thought he showed up after this, but he actually does show up before this. So yeah, let me get to him real quick. Okay, so Dahaka is a Primal Zerg pack leader who is this sort of like I don't even really know how to describe him other than like sort of bipedal, has like multiple arms and a tail, and he's like almost like sort of a wolf, like werewolf type of thing, but not really. And he's like missing an arm. And he's actually been spying on you for the first two missions. Like you can find him and it's basically just like mysterious creature and he'll burrow away. But after Crucible, when you go back to the Leviathan, Dahaka will show up in the like main area with Isha and whatnot. And he introduces himself and he's basically like, I'm willing to side with you. And because basically his whole thing is that he just wants to collect essence. Like that is his whole thing, is to collect and evolve. He's literally like he says collect a lot essentially, and he realizes pretty quickly that siding with Kerrigan is probably a good idea because she can bring him a lot of essence so long as he sticks around. So Kerrigan is willing to let him tag along, and he gives her some advice on the primals. And then during Supreme, he also supplies Kerrigan with various primal Zerg forces. So it's like specific, like the Roaches, Hydralisks, and even an Ultralisk with, and also some Zerglings that are have a primal strain compared to the others. But outside of, I think, really the Zergling, which has a bit more HP, the primal strain is basically just a reskin of your like normal units. I don't think they have too much else in terms of abilities, but it's still pretty, like they look cool. I'll just say that. But anyway, back to Supreme during this. So you first fight Yagdra, and Yagdra is this like worm-like creature that spits fire and can burrow through the ground. So he's a neat boss fight. After that, you fight, but anyway, you kill Yagdra obviously because you're killing all of them. After that, you fight Kraith, which is this sort of like almost like armadillo. It's this like beetle armadillo type dude who like loves to charge into walls and has giant spikes on his back. His boss fight's a little annoying because it's like a pretty cramped arena, but not super difficult. And the last one is Sliven, who is she is basically just a giant swarm host, and she just spawns a ton of like not necessarily banelings, but like kind of banelings that more crawl instead of roll. She's kind of annoying, but it's like once you can get around her 50 billion children, she's not super difficult. But anyway, after killing Sliven, Zervin shows up and he's all super happy because he's like, yes, my plan has come to fruition. I have made you super powerful, so now I'm going to kill you and then I will take all your power. So it's like a betrayal that isn't super surprising given how we know the Zerg work, or the primal Zerg work. But anyway, you still have to fight Zervin, and he's an all right boss fight. Not the most interesting one because it's more like he just kind of sits still and occasionally does some attacks that are kind of telegraphed, and you have like a tiny little semicircle to fight on. Honestly might be the weakest boss fight of the four during Supreme, but actually you kill Zervin, and Kerrigan has absorbed all the primal pack leaders that have opposed her, so she is the undisputed ruler of the primal Zerg, and she's now also the Queen of Blades once more, properly, with a huge boost in power. This is also what gets her third ability slots and everything. And so yeah, after that, she returns to the Krupulu sector with a ton of new powers at her disposal. Also during this, I forgot to mention, there's this one really funny Abathur dialogue where I think it's after the first mission, and Kerrigan goes down the evolution pit to talk with Abathur, and she finds him and he's just seething, like he is angry as hell. And Kerrigan's like, why are you so angry? And he basically just explains like the primal roaches are a thing, and since roaches were an overmind creation, like very much a Zerg swarm creation, not a primal Zerg creation, like they shouldn't exist. But the fact that they do is like, he's just angry that the primal Zerg blatantly stole his ideas. He's basically just angry at plagiarism by the primal Zerg, and he's like, "Why? We were on the planet for 2 seconds, and the primals are already copying our style." And Kerrigan is like a second away from bursting out from laughter because she's like, she's never seen Abathur so genuinely upset before. It's really, really funny. Anyway, so going back, now we can go to Char, since now we're properly powered up, and I feel like it makes more sense at this point to go to Char. So the first mission is not against the Terran, but instead the Zerg. One of the few Zerg versus Zerg missions in the game. And basically, when you show up, Isha's like, "Hey, so there's this brood mother we left on Char named Zagara. And she's basically controlling everything, but she doesn't think you're worthy enough to control the swarm, so you got to go teach her a lesson." So you have to go down into the tunnels underneath of Char and fight Zagara. And this is the mission where you unlock the Baneling, and there's basically just a bunch of Banelings nests scattered throughout the map. So you got to go collect more of them, like more eggs before Zagara can, so you can hatch your Baneling army. And once you do, you go up, use the giant massive Banelings to crash through Zagara's forces and force her to surrender. And like Zagara kind of pleads for her life and persuades Kerrigan to let her live. And Kerrigan basically takes Zagara on as a protege, essentially. Zagara's a very cool character where she starts out, like, basically she evolves mentally over the course of the story, like through her dialogue stuff, where Kerrigan is basically teaching her to think more than just her initial, like, not necessarily programming, because she's not a like computer, but it's like that sort of idea, like her initial directives that she was given when she was created. Kerrigan kind of teaches her vision. Like, that's one of the quotes, is like, Zagara has to learn vision, and to like think more, because Kerrigan basically grooms Zagara as her successor is essentially what happens. And Zagara's a very cool character. She's also, I want to say she's voiced by, let me just double check. I'm pretty sure she is the voice actress who voices Asajj Ventress in Star Wars, among other things. But I am 99% sure. Yes, Nika Futterman is the voice actress who voices Zagara and also Ventress. Futterman also voices just basically all of the queens, I think, or like most of the queens. Like, definitely the default queen unit. And I mean, she's in a bunch of things, but that is like just one of the one of the main roles that I know her from. But yeah, anyway. So that is her voice. I just want to throw that out there. I forget who voices. Let me double check who voices Dahaka, because it's like Steve Blum or something like that. It's actually kind of funny. But yeah. So anyway, Zagara becomes your sort of another advisor. Yeah, it is Steve Blum who voices Dahaka, which is kind of funny, because I'm not going to attempt Dahaka's voice at all. It is very particular, but if you go and look up some dialogue from him, he's got a very particular way of speaking, essentially. But yeah, he's voiced by Steve Blum, who has voiced a lot of things. I'm not going to try and name anything that anyway. But yeah, so with Zagara now under your command, or Kerrigan's command, Zagara basically explains that everything above ground is entirely controlled by the Dominion, and if they want to get to Warfield's base, they have to go through what is known as the Bone Trench. And it is called that because there's a bunch of dead Zerg down there. But it is an underground tunnel and is really the only kind of safe way to get to a good staging point to go for the Dominion base that Warfield is commanding. And so this is one that Fire in the Sky is a mission. And it's a solid mission overall, where you're basically going through the giant corridor, and Warfield sends through a giant battle cruiser called a Gorgon. It's like a separate class from the normal battle cruiser, and it basically has a giant radius underneath that if you go under it, you will die. It will kill you. Not like instantly, but you will die. So the goal is to spread creep throughout the level and activate a bunch of Scourge nests. The Scourge nests, when they're activated, they will basically just send a bunch of Scourge, which, if you remember from StarCraft 1, they are basically these flying units that will explode and do a ton of damage when they come into contact with anything in the air. So it's basically just send up a bunch of living bombs to the Gorgons. And so you have to manage, basically the whole mission is managing your creep spread while slowly advancing through the corridor, avoiding the Gorgons, and making sure you don't run out of time as you're going through. It's a solid mission overall. But eventually you get through and you take down the Gorgons and force Warfield retreat back to his compound. And that is where Old Soldiers comes in, the climax to the Char storyline. And the first set of first act of the mission, I guess I could say, is basically a full frontal attack by Kerrigan and just a ton of Banelings and Zerglings. So you got to bust through the base and basically just do as much damage as you can. And after like 5 minutes or so, Warfield will send in the nuclear option and just nuke everything, killing all your units, forcing Kerrigan to retreat back to her base, which is like 5 feet from the front door, which I always find kind of funny. And yeah, so it's basically just a do as much damage as you can in the limited amount of time. It's sort of like one of those surprise attack missions, but the enemy knows you're coming. You can actually get a good chunk of the enemy defenses down if you know what you're doing, which is kind of fun. So I like these kind of mission designs where you can influence the rest of the mission by how you do in the starting section. But after that, it becomes sort of a normal macro mission. You get the Aberration, which is a unit that returns from StarCraft Wings of Liberty. Though now it has like actual stats and whatnot. It has like some extra abilities here and there, or like some extra little quirks to it. And it's basically, Zagar is like, I created this myself, my queen. How do you like it? Do you like my creation, senpai? It's like her dialogue for that is pretty funny. And then meanwhile, Abathur has a line of dialogue. I forget if it's in the mission or after, where he's like, this is awful. What? I hate this. This is so inefficient. But he's also like, at the same time, he's kind of like, yet somehow it works, and I have no idea why. He is very confused and very offended at the existence of the Aberration, but he's also willing to accept it because Kerrigan accepts it. It's another funny little quirk between the side characters that are very, very solid in this game. But after, with the Aberration and your team, or get your swarm, you go in and you basically just go through the base and you kill everyone there. And eventually, after destroying the sort of like main compound that Warfield's at, you get to the cutscene where in the ruins of the command center, Warfield is kind of lying on the ground. He has this giant piece basically has like a giant iron girder stuck in his torso. And Kerrigan shows up, and Warfield basically just has like the best line best set of lines in the entire campaign, where he's basically just calls Kerrigan out on all of her BS and like basically just says she's stupid, because it's like rightfully calls her out, by the way, where he's basically just says like, we sacrificed everything for you and you immediately turned around and basically just went back to being the Queen of Blades. And this is another one where I have to harp on the story again, and like why going to Char first is kind of dumb, because there's two versions of this cutscene. One where Kerrigan is, still human and like with her ghost suit and whatnot, and then the other where after Xeris and she has her Super Saiyan power up, and she's as Queen of Blades. This cutscene makes a lot more sense if she's the Queen of Blades, because she is by this point completely thrown away her humanity again and is like just gone back to being the Queen of Blades, even if she is morally slightly better than she was before. This cutscene, if it's with other Kerrigan, like just human Kerrigan, just doesn't work nearly as well. But anyway, Kerrigan uses her psychic powers to just impale the rebar on Warfield a bit more and kills him. It's kind of, I don't like that they killed off Warfield here. He deserved to go out better. And then it's like, it tries to give this redemption moment where it's like you hear on Warfield's comms that there's some like medic transports trying to leave, but there's too much Zerg and they're never going to get out. And then Kerrigan like literally bathed in white light as she does this. It's like really cheesy. She calls the Zerg off essentially and lets some of the wounded leave, as if she hasn't butchered through like probably thousands, if not tens of thousands of Terran to get through here, like to retake charge. It's just it doesn't work as it doesn't work. I'm sorry. But yeah, so with that, with Char taking over, with new power from Xerus, and then also the Protoss being not aware of her presence, I guess, we get to the late game. Since there's only 5 missions before the end, I still don't like this. I should also probably go through some of the evolution missions. So the Hydralisk and Baneling evolutions we can go through, since those are available at this point. The Baneling evolution mission, which happens after Old Soldiers, you can get the Splitter Strain, where it's basically when the Baneling explodes. Banelings, which I don't think I ever actually talked about, they evolve directly from the Zerglings, and they are basically just like the Scourge, but for the ground, where they will blow up on contact, killing the Baneling, but also dealing a ton of damage in an area around the Baneling. I'm not a huge fan of them, to be honest. I just don't like using up units like that. The 2 evolutions for the Baneling are the Splitter Strain, which when they explode, they split into 2 smaller Banelings, which then can also explode and deal some damage as well. It's kind of like the Corpser Strain from the Roach, which is why I don't really like this evolution too much, because it's like this and the Corpser, it's like kind of reusing ideas, which is kind of dumb. The other one is the Hunter Strain, which is basically a Baneling has the ability to jump up and down cliffs and also leap over enemies instead of having to roll through them. It's okay. It like a lot of times the like actual jumping animation when they're attacking just kind of takes too long and it staggers them a bit too much. So the Splitter Strain is, I think, a bit better just because you just get more bang for your buck. But it's still like neither of the evolutions I feel like for the Baneling are super exciting. The Hydralisk evolutions, though, these are where it's at. So I'm just reading through to refresh myself. So yeah, the first evolution is, well, they're both throwbacks actually to StarCraft 1. So the first one is that their Abathur has located some Impaler colonies, and it's basically they just kind of renamed the Sunken colonies from StarCraft 1. And I don't know if I ever really talked about Sunken colonies when I was doing my StarCraft 1 overview, but Zerg static defense being a building you create that is largely in place and is a defensive building. So the Zerg had a Sunken colony and a Spore colony. In StarCraft 1, the Terran had bunkers and missile turrets, and then Protoss had photon cannons and shield batteries. In StarCraft 2, basically not changed except for the fact that the Zerg have spine crawlers and spore crawlers. They're changed a little bit where you can actually uproot them and move them. Otherwise, basically everything else is unchanged. Spine crawlers are also just worse than sunken colonies. Spine crawlers aren't bad. Sunken colonies, it was just that sunken colonies were absurd. They were very bulky and dealt so much damage at really long range. It was really the only problem was that they could only hit one unit at a time, and they had a kind of slow firing rate, but they were still really, really nice. And so this is one where basically you destroy the Impaler colony and you turn the Hydralisks into the Impaler Strain, and the Impaler Strain can morph from the Hydralisk into an Impaler, and the Impaler can burrow underground and basically turn into a mobile sunken colony. It has an incredibly long range with a really, really, really good attack that does a ton of damage against armored units. The Impalers are insanely good. The other mission, on the other hand, is for the Lurker. And Lurker is, throwback to StarCraft Brood War. So you actually go and find, you go to a planet that was once, according to Abathur, a birthing colony for Dagoth's brood. So it's, a nice little throwback to StarCraft 1 there. And so you can basically make Lurkers. Unfortunately, Lurkers just aren't, they're fine. They're not the Impaler. The Impaler is one of the best units in Heart of the Swarm. And so unfortunately the Lurker just kind of gets left behind. And it's because it's just it's really, really good against mass Marines and mass Zerglings. And after this, like by the time you get the Hydralisk, and especially when you get the Lurker, I don't think there's any Zerg versus Zerg left in the campaign. So yeah, it's just a little unfortunate. The Impaler is just much better. But anyway, so let's go back to the main campaign. It's going a bit longer than I would like, but there luckily aren't too many missions left. So I'll try and speed through this a little bit longer. So we'll go to with friends like these. You have another two options. You can go to either a Dominion planet called Skygear Station, or after receiving a mysterious transmission from someone who's claiming to be an ally, or you get a transmission from Matt and Valerian on the Hyperion who want to talk. And basically, you go to the Hyperion, you link up with Matt and Valerian, and Matt's like, hey, so we found out that Rainer's alive and he's being hidden on a on some Dominion planet. So we got to go and get this guy, Colonel Orlin, to go help us find him. And if you remember Colonel Orlin from Wings of Liberty, he was he didn't end on the best terms with with the Raiders, and it turns out that Orlin is actually basically just kind of working kind of as an indentured servant to Mira Han, and Mira is playing hardball with Matt at the moment. So Matt, it's actually a pretty fun mission where you actually play as the Hyperion in space, and it's very like complete departure from the rest of the game, but it's like gameplay wise, but it's still pretty fun where you're just flying around in the Hyperion, some occasionally deploying some like TAC fighters and like using your mono cannon, and it's sort of like you got like endless waves. It's like almost like a MOBA in that sense of like you have endless waves of AI, allies and enemies just duking it out and like a push pull like tug of war kind of thing as you go along. It's pretty fun, and like the entire while is Mira and Matt just bantering the whole time because they're basically just having a lover spat. It's really fun. It's like this is probably the funniest mission in like all of StarCraft II. You also get like a lot of dialogue from Swan, who's like because he's the engineer of the Hyperion. And there's like, as you get more minerals, like space minerals over the course, you like upgrade the ship, and Swan's basically just explaining the upgrades. And because Valerian's also on the ship, Swan, who like loves to give nicknames to everyone, he calls him Skippy, and Valerian's just like, he's like, Swan calls him Skippy, and Valerian just repeats back like, Skippy? He's so confused. Like he the thought of like having a nickname, especially something like that, he's like, he just blue screens in his mind. It's so funny. But anyway, and the end of the mission, you're basically fighting against Mira's pirate forces to try and basically convince her to hand over Orlin. And eventually you do. Mira gets like, you beat her enough, and Mira's like, all right, stop. You're costing me too much money. Matt, you're breaking my heart. Please stop. It like playfully. She's like angry, but not like really that angry. And she hands Orlin over, and Orlin at this point is like, all of you are crazy. I hate this place. Please just let me go. he does not want to be here. And it's really funny. But yeah, eventually Orlin works with you, or like is able to find a location, and it leads to the mission Conviction. So there is a ship called the Moros, which is basically this mobile prison that Rainer's on, and it basically just kind of jumps around the space constantly. So it like is never in the same location twice, and is like never in the same location for more than an hour or something. So it's like basically impossible to find. So it's where the Dominion sends all of their like top secret prisoners. Why they kept Rainer alive, I got no idea. Like I guess it's because Manx wanted to like draw Kerrigan out, but I think just kind of killing him would have done it anyway. So I don't know. But yeah, eventually you break into the ship, and you go through. It's a pretty easy mission. And you go through and you find Rainer at the end. Honestly, this mission is not really all that interesting to describe. And then basically Kerrigan breaks open the door to Manx's prison cell, or not, sorry, Rainer's prison cell. Manx is not the one in prison here. But yeah, she shows up, and she's all Zergy now again. And Rainer's like, he actually pulls his gun because he has his gun on him for some reason. And Kerrigan's like completely willing to like let Rainer shoot her in the forehead, because like all she wants is Rainer, and all Rainer wants is Kerrigan, because they're lovers and whatnot. But it's like it's Basically Raynor instead shoots the wall behind her and then just storms out and doesn't say a word because it's like, oh, they're upset with each other, but also Raynor's like doesn't call her out on it, doesn't say she's wrong or anything. He just says nothing. It's whatever. I don't care about this, to be honest. I don't really care for Jim and Kerrigan in this story. It's the weakest aspect of it. Anyway, let's go to a better set of missions, the Skygear Station missions. So the first one is Infested. So you get the mysterious summons, and you find standing in your little observation room none other than, of all people, Alexei Stukov. If you remember, Stukov was the Vice Admiral of the UED back in StarCraft Brood War, who was seemingly killed by Samir Duran, who was, in fact, an agent for Kerrigan back during that time, although Duran is actually something else entirely. And so Stukov was seemingly dead, and we'd never see him again, but turns out he's alive, though he's also infested at this point. He's not just human anymore. He's not having a good time. But yeah, Stukov basically is there, and he's like, remember me, we were enemies, but now we can be friends because we have a common enemy, Dr. Emil Narud, the head of Mobius. You also know him as Samir Duran. Remember, he was on your side and he also killed me, but also didn't kill me. From what I remember, basically what happened to Stukov was that when he was a corpse, essentially, I guess Mobius and Duran took him and basically just performed a bunch of experiments on him to infest him and then de-infest him and then infest him again. It was something weird, but essentially Stukov was held captive by Duran for an indiscriminate amount of time and was infested and reinfested, experimented on a bunch. It's now currently infested, but is actually pretty strong. And Stukov harbors a deep-seated hatred towards Duran. So Kerrigan's all right, yeah, sure, let's do it. So Stukov is this station is where Duran and Mobius and the Dominion have one of their big secret research facilities, and it's it's very well protected, but we can break in. This is the mission where you get the Infestor. The Infestor is a support spellcaster that has a lot of very nifty stuff. It has a mind control ability that it just takes control of an enemy unit permanently. It's very, very strong. It's also fun where all the enemy units can have they have custom voice lines, which is pretty neat, where it's they'll just go for the swarm we obey, and it's all them all the voice actors for the the Terran units come back and do that, and they have their voices altered to sound a little bit more assimilated and stuff. It's neat. But yeah, this is one where there's big old Dominion fortification that you have to break in. So you're trying to break into the front door. And what you do is you use the infestors to infest all the garrisons to just create an army of infested Terran to just kind of wave rush into the enemy and take the damage while your forces actually pick off targets. And it's you basically have to time it where the Dominion will release gas, which will kill all the infested Terran. So it's an alternate attack and defense type mission where you attack with the swarm of infested, then pull back when they all die, and then defend, and then attack, defend, attack. Pretty simple. There's also a kind of fun Easter egg where there's a section where you're kind of split off to go infest some more barracks, and to defend them, among others, are a group of predators. Predators are basically they're a unit which I forget if I talked about too much. I don't remember if I mentioned them or not, but they were an option in the laboratory in StarCraft in Wings of Liberty, where it was either that or the Hercules transport. The Hercules is basically just a massive dropship that can hold 50 bajillion units. The Predator, on the other hand, are robotic dogs, essentially, that have an area effect, electric pulse attack that is sadly not great. The Predator's a terrible unit in Wings of Liberty. It's really only good against Zerglings, and that's it. They're good against nothing else. It's a total meme, and you should never use it, but they're still cool. And essentially, when you're attacking the garrison there, 5 Predators show up, and they're all different colors, so they're all supposed to be Voltron, essentially. It's a Voltron reference is what it is, so it's pretty neat there. But anyway, after this, you blow up the door, and you go in, and you go into the station, and you get started, or you start to get taunted by Dr. Narud, who's also Duran, because it's like with the whole, I guess it was like supposed to be a secret when they created StarCraft II Wings of Liberty with Dr. Narud, but then everyone figured out that Narud was just Duran spelled backwards, and everyone correctly guessed the twist that Duran and Narud were the same person. So they just, like, Stukov basically, like, when you initially meet him, he just gives you the explanation that Narud and Duran are the same person. No sort of, like, dramatic reveal or anything like that. But anyway, you go in and you find that there are hybrid being created in this facility. And that's why Stukov wants your help in destroying it, because, hybrid are not good. And so this is one where you're largely fighting against the Dominion and their defenses in here. But you're also in a race against time, because the hybrid, as they awake, they start draining Kerrigan of her powers, because I guess these can just do that. None of the other hybrid after this ever do it. I don't know why. But yeah, it's kind of neat, because the hybrid are not allies with the Dominion. Like, you can just leave the Dominion into the hybrid and vice versa, and they will start fighting each other. But you just have to be mindful of the time during this, when, like, so Kerrigan doesn't die to the hybrid. Eventually you take down all the hybrid and also most of the Dominion, and then you progress deeper into the lab, and then that was also the mission Hand of Darkness. Then you get to the last of the lab, and it's actually basically underneath as a giant, like, Tal'Darim temple, essentially. Or it's like Xel'Naga temple, actually, being guarded by the Tal'Darim. And if you remember, the Tal'Darim are Protoss fanatics who basically they worship the Dark God, is what they say. They worship the, like, big bad evil guy who's controlling everything, with Duran being sort of a lieutenant of the big bad evil guy, who actually gets name dropped at the end of this mission. And so yeah, this is like the only other Protoss versus Protoss mission in the campaign that isn't an evolution mission. And so in this one, Kerrigan basically walks up to a platform with Narud on the other side, and they basically have a giant Dragon Ball Z beam struggle over the middle of the map. And so there's a bunch of temples located around the map that you have to take Stukov with, along with a bunch of Ultralisks, because it's the mission where you get the Ultralisk. And you have to go around and destroy all the temples to weaken Narud, so Kerrigan can take him down with a beam struggle. So it's again, pretty simple mission. You go around, you destroy the things, you hold the temples for a little bit. Stukov's pretty fun. He's not nearly as powerful as Kerrigan, but he's still fun to control, and Ultralisks are really, really nice. And so yeah, you blow up the temples, you beat Narud, then you get a cutscene where Kerrigan and Narud are fighting, and Narud, who's like the shapeshifter, he like shapeshifts into ghost Kerrigan, so like human Kerrigan back from before she got infested, to like taunt her, I guess. And then and then Narud shifts into Raynor to try and like psych her out. And then he stabs her with an energy blade, and then Kerrigan like stabs him with her own like wing claws, but also stabs herself with it. But then she just lives, so it's like very anticlimactic fight. But anyway, like as Narud is like dying, sort of, he's like dying, but then goes back to the void or something. He doesn't die in this permanently, but he names drop his master named Amon. Amon being the Xel'Naga, like Amon is a Xel'Naga who's like the dark god essentially, and the dark voice in Zeratul vision in Utter Darkness from the last campaign, and the big bad evil of StarCraft, both StarCraft and StarCraft II actually, since he was kind of sort of hinted in StarCraft 1 with Duran in the secret mission and at the end of the Brood War. But yeah, the big bad evil guy has a name now, and we will get to him next mission or next campaign, because he doesn't show up again in this one. All right, let me go for another couple of evolution missions, because we have the Mutalisk and Swarm Host evolutions. The Mutalisk evolutions are a lot more interesting. So you can choose, like in StarCraft 1, the Mutalisk can evolve into a completely different unit. This one you can choose between the Broodlord or the Viper. Both units you can actually use in multiplayer. The Broodlord, pretty similar to the Guardian. It basically combines the Guardian's long-ranged anti-ground attack with sort of the Spawn Broodlings ability, where instead of just using an acid attack, like a little ball of green energy to attack, it just kind of launches a pair of broodlings that do a ton of damage, and then also like spawn essentially. They'll also exist on the ground. It's not the queen's like insta kill ability from StarCraft 1, but it's still like it has the idea of like it attacks and then creates a couple of broodlings to do some extra damage and kind of harass stuff. It's just a long-ranged anti-ground siege weapon, essentially. The other unit is the Viper, which is a spellcaster. It's got a bunch of different abilities. So it has, I forget if it has Dark Swarm or like a Dark Swarm equivalent, but it's a pretty cool unit where it kind of lore-wise, it sort of evolved from a Primal Zerg with some like additions to the with some added abilities from the Defiler from StarCraft 1, which had the Dark Swarm. So I think it has, in the campaign, it has Dark Swarm, or like a version of it where it basically creates a cloud, and in the cloud, no one can be harmed by range attacks. So it's like you use the Dark Swarm, like throw a bunch of Ultralisks under it, and you basically force the enemy to fight the Ultralisks in melee range and then die. The Viper also has a yoink ability where it just stretches out its tongue and pulls something to it. It can pull ally or enemy, so it's pretty useful. And then it has like one other ability that I honestly don't remember. It's a very complex unit that I never use because I'm not very good with it. And it's also not super useful in the campaign. Broodlords are just flat. They're just a bit more all around useful than the Vipers, but the Vipers are still pretty cool. The Swarm Host evolutions, on the other hand, are not that interesting. There's the Carrion Strain, which basically just spawns Flying Locusts instead of locusts that crawl along the ground. Flying Locusts are a bit faster and deal more damage, but they have a bit less life. And then the other one is the Creeper Strain, which basically just allows the Swarm Host to tunnel anywhere on the map that has creep on it. Not really all that useful. It's designed to be a flexible defense option, but there just isn't really any mission by this point in the game that needs it. So it's just better to go with the Flying Locust team, and then you probably don't really need to be making Swarm Hosts at all, because they're just not super useful. But anyway, now that we are sufficiently deep into this episode, we get to the last three missions of the campaign. This is the assault on Korhal, as Kerrigan is going to take down Mengsk. First one is Planetfall. As the name suggests, you're assaulting the planet. A lot of things are falling. Basically, a lot of drop pods fall from the sky. Your goal is to secure a bunch of virophages around the map. Basically, just siege weapons that Kerrigan wants to use to secure an area to then secure more areas. Basically, just defend the objective that will do damage to things at various points. Pretty simple overall design. The virophages land on various points of the map. There's just a lot of enemy Terran all over the place, and you got to go around and blow stuff up. And yeah, it's pretty, nothing too interesting about this one, if I'm being honest. It's just kind of, you establish a base on the ground, and you protect the virophages. After this, though, you get the Ultralisk evolution mission, and this one's pretty fun because it's like taking place on Korhal. And honestly, both the evolutions are pretty fun, but there's one that is a bit more fun than the other. So the first one is the Noxious Strain, and it's one where there's like a couple Ultralisks being held captive or like being experimented on in a facility, and Kerrigan kind of commands them to break out, and then they accidentally break this like container of toxic chemicals, and it like seeps into their like evolutionary system, and Abathur's like, ooh, fun. And basically creates the Noxious Strain, which like they emit like this permanent cloud, or basically like when they attack, they create this like cloud of toxic energy that does like AoE damage around. So it's basically just, they deal more AoE damage, essentially. That's about it. It's just, do you want more damage per Ultralisk, essentially? And they look kind of neat. The other one, though, is another throwback to StarCraft 1, and it is the Tarask. It is not the like infinitely respawning Tarask, kind of, but it is, and when it dies, it enters into Chrysalis and then it respawns. That's it. You just get you get a respawning Ultralisk, and it's really cool. Like, Ultralisks are already really bulky and already do a ton of damage, so it's just you just want more Ultralisk. Here's more Ultralisk. The evolution mission itself is really fun because there's kind of a running gag with this like I think over the course of all 3 campaigns, where I think it's in the mission with the Odin, the Media Blitz, where you're on Core Hall with the Odin. You can like stomp on a sports car and like a Marine will show up and he's like, dude, my car, I just got that insured. Come on, man. And then you can do the same thing in here where there's like another sports car and it'll show up and a Marine will pop out and he's like, oh no, my car, come on. It's really fun. But yeah, like basically the way this happens is that like you're rampaging with some Ultralisks and then, Manx is like, fire the warhead to go blow up the Ultralisks. And there's like a scientist who's like all nerdy and stuff. And he's like, but sir, the warhead's experimental. We don't know what it'll do. And Manx with like one of the best line deliveries ever by this voice actor. He's like, fire the damn warhead now. It's so good. And so he just launches the nuke and it kills all the Ultras, but then mutates them into Tarasks. And it's just, you just run through the rest of the mission with them. It's really fun. And there's like another line from Marine where he's just like, it got back up. Oh, that ain't right. And then you just, it's so good. I love the Tarask train because it's so simple. You just get more Ultralisk per Ultralisk. And who doesn't love more Ultralisk per Ultralisk? It's very fun. Very simple, but very fun. So anyways, after that, we go to Death from Above, the penultimate mission of Heart of the Swarm. And this is one where there's basically a giant platform floating above Core Hall, and it has a new weapon developed by the Dominion, a Side Destroyer. So it is the culmination of this like psi emitter technology. You know, you have the psi emitters and the psi disruptors. We now have the Side Destroyer, which basically just creates a giant field of energy, and any Zerg within it just kind of die. It's a damage over time effect, and they just kind of die because it has that sort of, it preys on that psionic connection that the Zerg have with like their hive mind, I guess. But because of that, the Primal Zerg are immune because they have zero connection, literally none, to that sort of psionic hive mind. They're just kind of their own independent beings. So Dahaka shows up and Kerrigan deploys him and some of his forces, and because Dahaka has does not take damage from it or any of the Primal Zerg, there's like little separate like mini no build missions within the actual like macro mission itself that you have to go through to basically destroy the like extenders for the Side Destroyer. So it's like pretty fun because you get to use Dahaka again, and you use Dahaka personally for the first time. And he's pretty fun because he has the same Viper thing where like he can use his tongue to just yoink an enemy. Then he also has like a mend ability, so he'd be pretty fun. He's a fun unit. And then he has like a whack someone with your claw to do a ton of damage, I'm pretty sure. But yeah, Dahaka's fun. There's also like the first time he shows up, I think it's Manx who comments. He's like, "What is that creature?" He's like, because Dahaka is very unique when it comes to Zerg, so he's very, very confused at the fact that A, like what is Dahaka, and B, why is Dahaka able to walk through the Side Disruptor or Side Destroyer field? And yeah, so you do that, and eventually you're able to take down the power links to depower the Side Destroyer, and then you use your main force with Kerrigan to go and blow it up. So like it's basically after the Dahaka stuff, it's a pretty normal mission. And yeah, so then the final mission, the Reckoning, is actually a pretty tough mission overall. It's just a ton of various bases along the map, all commanded by, or all held down, defended. That's the word, defended by elite Terran forces. So they're like basically the mercenary versions of all units. So they're like better attack, better health, and they look cooler. And they even have new versions for like Thors and even battle cruisers, I'm pretty sure. And like also Hellions and Reapers, like all the Terran is here. But also during this, you get Raynor shows up, and him and the Hyperion, they show up and kind of establish their own base. So you got to work with Raynor and protect him as well, because Manx throws a ton of stuff at Raynor, like various different waves. And it's a like the actual, like actually playing the mission, it's complex, but you know, the summary of the mission is that it's a big macro mission. You have your big door at the end that you got to blow down to go and find Manx, and you just got to go beat up all the Terran in the middle. But playing through it is fun because it's like, it's the toughest Terran enemy against your full force. And so you just got to be better. And it's pretty fun because eventually like Manx, if you wait long enough, he'll send the actual Odin after Raynor. So you have to actually fight against the Odin, which is pretty cool. And like you can take it down eventually. It's usually impalers are really good against that because basically everything Terran has is armored that they throw at Raynor, and just making like a line of impalers that are specialized against armor is very fun to just watch the conga line get shredded. But yeah, so eventually though you're able to take down Manx's defenses, breach the wall, and the final cutscene is Kerrigan going into Manx's palace to take her revenge. But surprise, surprise, Manx has the Zelnanga artifact, as we hadn't seen that before. So he starts zapping her with it, and he's like monologuing and stuff. And then, literally from the shadows, like in stealth mode somehow, Raynor shows up in his power suit, which again makes him like 9 feet tall and is like this giant metal. It's a giant metal suit. So I don't know how, but yeah, he shows up and yoinks the remote to trigger the artifact out of Manx's hands. And then Manx, now defenseless, gets picked up by Kerrigan, and she like does some weird psionic thing that basically just makes him explode, and Manx is dead. So yay! He's obviously not a very good person at all. So yeah, the Dominion has lost its emperor. Kerrigan has exacted her revenge. Her and Jim seem to be together for a moment, but then Kerrigan basically just floats off back to her Leviathan because she's like, there's more to do. The final battle's approaching because she knows who Amon is now and like what he's going on, and it's like, oh yeah, I should probably go deal with that. It's probably a good thing to do. And she's entirely right on that front. Like Amon is no, he's not good. But it's still just kind of a weird image of like the end of it is like she's just floating off like an angel back up to her giant ship, or like the giant Leviathan floating in the sky while Raynor's just kind of looking on, and he's like, I think like I forget what Kerrigan says. Like she might just say thank you or something, and he just goes like my pleasure, darling. So it's a very sappy end to honestly a mediocre story overall. But hey, that's Heart of the Swarm. I tried to make it more interesting than I tend to find it. Again, it's too short, and the main story with Kerrigan is not great. But this like the side characters, and because I didn't really focus on them because most of their stuff comes from the in-game dialogue that you have with them, like when you can talk with them in between missions. I encourage people to go and check that out because it's really fun. Abathur especially is fantastic. But honestly, Abathur, Stukov, Dahaka, and Zagara, all 4 of them are great. Basically everyone but Isha in terms of the supporting cast that you have is really fun and significantly more interesting than Kerrigan. And yeah, so it's really fun overall. But yeah, that will do it. This episode was longer than I would have liked. I feel like I say that every time. But yeah, it's a little bit shorter than Wings of Liberty summary, the Wings of Liberty summary at least. But yeah, so that will do it. I will move on to Legacy of the Void after this. I guess I'll probably throw in a very brief summary of the Nova Covert Ops campaign after that because I can go through that in like probably 2 or 3 minutes. It's not that interesting, unfortunately, but there's some parts to it that I like, but overall it's not the best. But yeah, I'll go through Legacy of the Void after this. It's better. It's still, I wouldn't say it's quite as good as Wings of Liberty, but that's largely due to the epilogue and the stuff with Amon. The actual Protoss stuff is pretty fun, but that is for next week. So yeah, this coming Tuesday will be my summary of one of the NFC divisions, probably the NFC South, I think is what I'm going to go with. The recap of their seasons, what I did with the NFC East this past Tuesday. And yeah. And then obviously next week will be the Legacy of the Void summary. And then I will move on to something else 2 weeks from this Saturday. Something entirely new. Because I'm sure people are getting sick of StarCraft at this point. But I'm not. I love StarCraft. Other than that, YouTube is still going. I've Let's Played Portal. That is, episode 3 will be coming out tomorrow. I'm going to be uploading various YouTube shorts as well. I've already recorded some and going to edit them more as well. And then I'm also editing my big briefly summarizing video that has been in the works for weeks. That is taking a while. But yeah, it'll get there hopefully sooner rather than later. And then also, I do want to start streaming sometime soon. Not sure exactly when, but I want to do, my initial plan is that I want to stream game nights on Thursdays of various games, and then stream baseball on Saturday because I can do I want to do basically not Saturday, on Fridays. Every Friday night when there's an Orioles game during the regular season of 2026, I want to stream that game. And like just kind of do play by play and whatnot, and have like the MLB like live graph thing as the mainstream because I absolutely can't do the actual broadcast since I'm not allowed. But yeah, I want to do that. I might stream like a World Baseball Classic game here or there as well to like kind of get ready for the regular season. But yeah, that is when I figure out how to stream, what I want to stream. Those I think are going to be the 2 days, Thursday, Friday, at least to start. But that'll be for later though. For now though, that'll do it. Thank you very much for listening.